It's 10. I'm going to hit the button.
All right.
Right.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Mental Health Family Hour. Now, today's episode is all about suicide bereavement. This topic may be triggering for certain individuals, so if you do need to reach out for support, the platform I'll advise you to go to is called the Hub of Hope. You can basically go onto this app or website, type in your postcode, and all the available services will be there for you in your local area. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our wonderful guest joining us today, who I will get to introduce themselves shortly. If you are new to this webinar series, my name is Sam Tyrer. I'm the Prevention and Engagement Lead at Lancashire and South Cumbria Foundation Trust. I'm also the founder of a service called Change Talks, which is basically an educational program which aims to prevent ill health. And I'm also the co-host of this show. Dave.
That's getting so professional and slick now. I'm just Dave. That's it. I'm Dave,
aka
Mindset by Dave. I am a mental health and mindset coach and content creator who aims to put content out into the world that helps people live better lives with their mental health. That's it.
That was a shorter one than usual. So if anyone has any questions, you can put them into the chat, which Dave will monitor throughout the webinar. We may answer them throughout the chat, or we may leave them to the end. Any comments that you want to give back as well, please put them into there. If you don't want to put them onto the YouTube channel, then you can email me on sam.tyrer, so that's TYRER, @lscft.nhs.uk. So welcome, Helen and Sammie. Helen, could I first ask you to introduce yourself, please? Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. My name's Helen Birch. I'm what they call an expert by experience. So I was bereaved by suicide. I'm now also a master's student and a campaigner around perinatal mental health, particularly paternal mental health.
Brilliant, thank you. And Sammie?
Hi, I'm Sammie Ashely. I'm the Amparo team leader. Amparo is a suicide postvention service, and we offer support to anybody who's impacted or sort of affected by the loss of somebody by suicide.
Thanks, Sammie. So to start with, Helen, I'm going to ask you to share sort of your personal experience, and just to say I'm really grateful for you doing this. As you know, through our conversation, I've personally experienced losses to suicide as well. I've also taken care of people that have attempted to take their own life, and I know Dave has his own experiences as well. So to start with, Helen, please, I'll just hand it over to yourself.
Okay, yeah, so it was just over 5 years ago now. I lost my partner to suicide. We were pregnant at the time, and we also had an 11-month-old son. In our case, there weren't really any warning signs or anything. I mean, looking back, you could see that there probably were warning signs, but when you're in that moment, you don't actually ever think it's going to happen. You don't believe that will happen, you know, that somebody can do that. And living in ignorance was lovely, you know. It was a much better place than where we are now, you know, because the truth is it does happen a lot. But sadly, yeah, my partner came home one day after being out, and I could see something had changed in him. And I said to him, "Are you going to say something to the kids?" And he just kind of exhaled, and I could literally see, again with hindsight, the life coming out of him. And he said, "What's the point?" And he left the house and never came back again. I called the police, I think 2 days after he left the house, because it was quite apparent that something wasn't right. By this point, his phone had gone dead, so I knew something wasn't right, and I just had a feeling. Explained everything to the police, and within a few hours I got that phone call to come home, because I was out with my mum just trying to keep busy. Yeah, and then I walked into the house and heard the policeman say to me, "We've got some news. It's really not good news. We've found him. He's dead." And obviously they have to say those words, and from that moment on, my life was, and still is, never the same. Like I said, it's not something you ever think is going to happen. It's not. I don't think your brain can actually comprehend suicides, you know, somebody going out and completing suicide, taking their own life. If you haven't experienced a mental health crisis, you know, if you haven't experienced anything like that, your brain just cannot understand or comprehend how that happens. So the shock and the trauma on hearing that, and the journey you then have to go on is so intense. It's you know, it's bereavement, but on steroids. It is something else. It takes all of your strength. I remember not being able to stand. My body couldn't hold me up. And you know, bereavement hurts, but the physical pain that you feel on hearing those words and a long time afterwards is intense. It's actual physical pain. You quite often have almost panic attacks. I had, like, it was claustrophobia. I couldn't have doors shut or windows shut. There had to be space, there had to be air. I had to be near solid bricks because it felt like that would be the only thing that would hold me up, something solid. And also, in my case, I was also pregnant. I still had to go through a whole pregnancy. So it was, without a doubt, and I think it will always be, the most horrific experience in my life. And I mean, the reason I talk about this and share it, as much as I haven't actually spoken about this much detail of it for quite a while, it does take me back there and my heart's beating. We need to talk about this. We need people to say the word suicide and not have fear of it. We need people to be able to reach out, and we need people to be able to talk to those who have lost to suicide, because you know, when I said to people, oh, you know, what's happened? Oh, you know, my partner's dead, he killed himself, he took his own life. And you know, and the avoidance and the not knowing what to say, or the puppy dog the head tilt, I call it, the kind of, you know, and they just wouldn't know what to say. And I think the more we talk about these things, the more people we reach. So hopefully people don't end up in this crisis, but also those who have lost know that they're not alone, because that feeling of being alone is so scary, especially at night time. That's when it really kind of increased tenfold. The days were horrific. I mean, I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, self-care completely gone. I didn't wash, I didn't brush my teeth. I don't even remember going to the toilet. It's literally like your whole body just shuts down. It just stops completely. The world does stop. I've forgotten where I was going with that now. I've kind of
I just want to say, Helen, you know, that it's been hard for me to actually. It's brought back some emotions for myself as well, and I have to admit that I've been welling up through listening to your talk. Just sharing that alone, I just want to say thank you for sharing that. I think that's really difficult to do, and I know from my own experiences. And I think that even when I took care of patients that had attempted to take their life, I even remember what some of those unfortunately went on to end their own life. And even with that, never mind losing friends and everything in the past, just a sense of, I think from my own experiences, was a sense of sort of guilt, thinking, could I have done more? And that was a question that has sort of carried with me through, you know, eight years of my life. And it's something that I still do feel. And it's, yeah, sorry. Anyway, it brought back a lot of emotions, that, and I just want to say a huge thank you for sharing that. I know how difficult that is. And could I ask, could you sort of explain your, it's hard to, not journey to recovery, because I know that this is something that it feels like an ongoing process and something that you live with on a daily basis, but how have you sort of managed dealing with that bereavement?
Yeah, I agree. I actually do call it a journey to recovery, because you are recovering, you're rebuilding and recovering kind of in parallel. So the first year, and in conversations with other people going through this type of loss, the first year is just a blur. It's just all those emotions that I've just explained. That's basically your first year. You just have to sleep when you can, eat when people make you eat, and survive somehow. And then after that, once you come out of the fog, you then have to go through all the normal stages of grief. And I think you have to accept these stages, and they're not they're not one after the other. You just have to accept that at some points you're going to be really, really angry, and that's actually the hardest stage of grief for me. So I found personally writing really, really, really helpful and cathartic. All sorts of writing. Actually, there it is. This is my book of sanity, pain, grief, everything. My friend got me this, and I've got letters to my partner. Some are nice, some are not. I've got poems in there. I've got the actual day I gave birth. I wrote everything. I've got pages with just scribbles where I just that's what my head felt like a big exploding kind of mess. So writing was definitely something for me. Letting people help you, and by letting them help you, they don't actually have to do anything. The most memorable bit of help that I got was, aside from my really good friends and my parents, was from a midwife, because I spent quite a lot of time in hospital, obviously because my pregnancy wasn't the easiest or the greatest. And she just sat next to me. She had her arm on me. She just sat next to me and let me scream, cry. There was snot, there was tears. It was like ugly crying, and just random words coming out and stuff. But she was there. She was present. So let people be present. Let somebody run you a bath if they want to. Let somebody make you a sandwich. You don't have to eat it. Let people do your washing up. Let people find services to help you, because that's actually one of the hardest things, because you're not in the mindset to find help. You can't even open your own post, pay your own bills, do your own shopping. So anyone who comes to you, just let them help you. You've got to find your own outlet, and don't be afraid, because what you're going through is the most horrific and petrifying thing. So if your outlet is to go to the gym and punch the hell out of a punch bag, do it. Believe me, I really wanted to do that. I did say to somebody, please get me a punch bag, because I've got so much anger within me. And all these questions that you want to scream and shout, and if you're punching you can kind of scream and shout them. Questions that you've got, write them down, say them out loud. Just try and get it out your head, and let yourself go with it. Try and give yourself a break. What you're going through is just horrific enough. Don't beat yourself up for being angry with them, or for being angry with yourself, or for writing unkind words about somebody or something. Just get it out your head. So yeah, you'll find your own way, but this was my saviour. And also it's great to look back on to see how far you've come.
And in terms, Helen, of after it happened, do you think that people were sort of fearful to approach you and have the conversation about suicide? Because on one of our previous webinars, we spoke about grief. Now, I think people are more likely to approach individuals. Say, for example, if you've lost an elderly parent through natural causes, they'll come up to you and they're more likely to say, "Are you okay?" I think with losing to suicide, from my own perspective, I think people might be a bit more fearful because of how it happened, that they don't actually want to open up that conversation. Was that your experience?
Absolutely. You can see the fear in people's eyes. And also sometimes I remember I was in the doctor's surgery once, and this woman, you know, started a conversation, and I was pregnant, and, you know, had my other little boy with me. Started, you know, going, oh, what, you know, is the dad still not about? I think she actually said, is he a deadbeat? And I went, no, he's just dead. And she was like, oh. And then she carried on and on and on. Oh, well, you know, what happened? And in my head, I was like, I don't want to say it, because even I found it hard to say the word suicide. And to begin with, whenever I said it, the only way I could physically get the word out was to shout it. And I know it sounds really weird, but it was the only way I could physically get that word out. And she went on and on and on. And I went, it was suicide. And this poor woman's face, I mean, I do feel quite bad for her now, actually, but you should have seen the horror and the fear in her face. And she just went, and then that was the end of the conversation. And so many people just didn't do the normal, oh, I'm really sorry for your loss. Admittedly, a lot of people were really good. You really do find out who's your friends, and you get some surprises along the way. But suicide still is such a taboo topic. And I know people think that, oh, we talk about it a lot now. You know, it's on the telly, you know, celebrities talk about it. Actually, no. In real life, we don't talk about it, because still, if I'm out, and I do talk about mental health and suicide a lot. My daughter, even, she rolls her eyes at me sometimes, like, oh, Mum. But I'll start a conversation around suicide just because it's a conversation for me, and I think it should be spoken about more. And people either give you that, oh God, you know, or the, oh God, you know, what do I say? And people were fearful to say all sorts of things around me, because people do joke, oh, I've had a really bad day, you know, stuff like that. And then, you know, they'd look at me with fear and stuff. And I'm like, you know, people do say stuff, and it is part of, you know, the way we are as people. And when you have lost someone to suicide, it's not nice for all those gestures, but you don't have to be fearful of saying anything, you know. We'll either tell you if it upsets us or it doesn't, and then we can go from there. But absolutely, there is fear, and there is a lot more to do within general public and how to relate to somebody who's being bereaved by suicide.
Yeah, and I found, I mentioned in one of our previous episodes, that within schools now, a lot more young people are actually saying, I want to kill myself. They're just saying it, you know, quite often. Actually, they've had a bad day, they've not done the homework, so they're going, oh, I've had enough, I want to kill myself.
Yeah.
And what's been really worrying from the work that I've been doing is some of these young people that I know have taken a life over the last few years have told their friends that they're going to kill themselves. Their friends haven't believed it, because a lot of them are saying it now, so no one's acted on it. And then unfortunately they've gone on to take their life, which is really, really worrying, really worrying. So could you tell us, Helen, before we go on to sort of Sammie's work and everything, what sort of services were available to yourself in regards to sort of, you know, suicide bereavement and postvention? Was there anything, or have you only just come across things? What was your experience of that?
Well, I mean, I think I was lucky, not lucky, but lucky that I was pregnant and that I had children in junior school, because that meant other people were aware of our loss, and they work with families and are aware of services. So my children's school have a family support worker, and also I was given a specialist health visitor. So they were aware of SOBs, survivors of bereavement by suicide, who I was put in contact with. I didn't attend until I'd had my baby. I had to just do the pregnancy bit first. It was very confusing, and there was a lot to do. So without those, I wouldn't have known of any support. I didn't know of any locally, and I wasn't able to do the searching myself. But I was looked after by the specialist midwifery team who deal with mental health and loss. So I got personal support, but with regards to specialised postvention support, I was not aware of any. I don't think I would have been able to come aware of any. I became more aware of other charities that helped me in other ways, moving and food banks and stuff like that, you know, practically, and making sure the children were okay. But specific postvention, no. Obviously, along my journey, yes, I set up my own Facebook group just for parents experiencing trauma, just so I had somebody to talk to, because I didn't know of any other groups or anything. Now I'm aware of, there's a Facebook group that I'm on called Suicide Bereavement Support UK. That's, you know, that's full of other people who have lost to suicide as well. Obviously, you have to join when you're ready for those, because there are other people's stories on there. So I always say a bit of caution with looking after yourself with regards to joining groups. There's also the Harmless CIC and Tomorrow Project. They're really good with postvention and prevention training, and they offer support to you. And obviously Calm campaign against living miserably. But locally to me, no. In a word, no. We need to get services. I know it's happening in some places. I think Northamptonshire, Nottingham, I think, when there's a death record and a suicide, people get notifications, and then they can contact the family of those bereaved, so they get support without having to find it. And I think that should be rolled out nationally, because, like I said, actually searching for support when you're the bereaved person, it is nigh on impossible. So in short, no, there isn't anything locally, but because I was pregnant, I did get support.
I think, Helen, you are an incredibly inspiring woman. Honestly, your children are really lucky to have you. You know, you've completely blown me away in terms of your story, what you've been through, you know, going through that and bringing up a child as well. You know, I think you're amazing, genuinely. I'm going to end up crying. I've not cried in a webinar before. So I know Dave has a bit, but it's Dave, have you got any questions for Helen before we ask Sammie to talk about her stuff?
No, I've got no voice. I just want to say thank you as well for sharing so openly and so amazingly. It's I know when you said before that, you know, you've not been back there in such detail for a while, and I know that going anywhere in that level of detail automatically takes our emotions back to there. So thank you for kind of being vulnerable with us today and for sharing that. It's, yeah, and I echo what Sam said, really. It's we're just really glad to have you here, and really thankful for you and your story, even though obviously no one should ever have to go through this. When people do, having people like yourself that can share what they've been through and how they've come through things. And the other thing I actually just wanted to say is about the journal is all of those emotions completely and utterly valid. You know, anyone that wants to call like sadness or anger as negative emotions can jog on out of my webinars. It's like they are the most appropriate emotions at the time, and it is 100% valid to feel that way. And so thank you again for sharing that too.
Thanks, Dave. Helen, we will come back to you with some questions, but I think it really flows in nicely into Sammie talking about her service and what they offer.
Okay. So just to let you know that I work for Amparo when we're part of a charity called Listening Ear. And Listening Ear is based in Merseyside, but Amparo works across the whole of Cheshire, Merseyside and Liverpool, and the whole of Lancashire and South Yorkshire, and we're sort of working in Suffolk until the end of June, and then we've got other contracts in other areas as well we're exploring at the moment. Now, we've been working in Lancashire, we're a commission service, and we've been working in Lancashire since April last year. So we're sort of now covering the whole of Lancashire and promoting our service. And like Helen says and has said, it's about making that service available, not searching for that service. So what we do and what we're trying to do is our service comes into play as soon as somebody loses somebody. So it could be a police officer, it could be a coroner, it could be a mental health worker that will promote and see if people are interested in coming into Amparo and the support that we can offer. So that's the way that initially it will work. But so I mean, some of the stuff that you're saying, Helen, is definitely what we face with when we support people, and how difficult and how traumatic, and they are in shock initially when we make that contact. So we might receive a referral, and that referral, as long as the person gives consent, will come from it can come from who I've mentioned earlier, GP, coroner, etc. And then we will make contact within 24 hours. So somebody may have lost somebody over a weekend, and we will contact them possibly on the Monday if they've lost somebody over the weekend. And we will then ask, do you need any practical and emotional help and support at this time? So we won't take it for that they will take up that support, but we will ask them, is that okay? Do they want this support? And from that point onwards, we would then arrange that support and that contact with what we call a suicide liaison worker. And that worker will then help with some of that practical things, and it could be putting them in touch with the funeral director. It could be liaising with the coroner, speaking to signposting to other services. I know Helen's mentioned Suicide Bereavement. We signpost to the local support groups for that person. We also signpost to a group called Widowed and Young, which is a really good support group. So we do a lot of that research that maybe somebody at that time is struggling to do and isn't able to do. So we would do that research for them and finding what support they might need. But sometimes it can just be that emotional support that person needs. We're not a counselling service, but we provide that emotional support because we have been through and supported a lot of other people in the same situation. So it may be just a weekly check-in that person might need to explore some of those conversations, as Helen said, that people don't want to have. We will talk about suicide, we will normalise that word and have those conversations with that person. I mean, I know somebody that we're supporting at the moment isn't able to talk to any other family members about and mention that word to other family members because for fear of upsetting them. So they use that opportunity to have a conversation with us about their emotions and how they're feeling. And it could be that they're saying they're angry. It could be that they're, that disbelief, that guilt, and all of those things. So we will work through that, and we can actually, for a very recent loss or historical. So we often have people who maybe have lost somebody 5 years ago who come into our service. And again, we would look at what their needs are at that point, and we would start to consider signposting or emotional support at that time. So we work with somebody up until an inquest. And post-inquest as well, but we also explain what the inquest process might be like. For a lot of people, they're not familiar with that, and why should they be? So it's about just taking away some of those questions and being able to answer some of those things for them. So that's just a basic thing about what we do. I mean, we do a lot more, but just wanted to know that we, for us, it's about promoting our service and saying we are available. It still surprises me how many people out there that say, oh, I didn't know about Amparo. So we're trying to promote the service. So yes, we are commissioned. We're available, we are there, but post-pension services are quite new. And it's about sort of promoting that and making sure people are aware that yes, come to us. So if you've got any questions, etc., call us up. and we will say, yeah, just refer in if you need to, and then we'll take it from there. So, but everybody, there's no waiting list. Everybody's allocated a suicide liaison worker, and they will make contact within that 24 hours, which is a really, you know, that conversation, that initial conversation is very difficult. And often it can be that you were talking to somebody and they're very, very upset. And for us, it's about actually, we're used to that. So it's sad saying we are used to that, but we will have that conversation, whereas a lot of other people might avoid that conversation. Even other professionals might avoid having that conversation with that individual.
And you mentioned that if something happens over the weekend, for example, then on the Monday you can get referred straight in. So is that basically anyone that could potentially be a suspected suicide can come to you to access support?
Yeah, until the inquest has happened, Sam, it's always a suspected suicide.
Yeah.
So, you know, if it's a suspected suicide, even over the weekend, they can do a referral in and we will contact them, but they possibly won't get a call from somebody till the Monday. So, but just to say that, and often our referrals come Monday to Friday, but we do have some over weekend as well.
Yeah.
We will make contact within 24 hours, regardless of when that referral comes to us.
And could you tell us a bit about, in terms of when they're first referred in, what is that first initial conversation with that individual? What are the type of questions that you ask?
Okay. Helen, did you have a question? Was it similar to that, or was it?
No, I was just going to say, if it ends up getting recorded as misadventure, would you still?
They don't very often record in that way now, but we will have supported them anyway, so we wouldn't just stop that support at that point. So initially, when we have that call, Sam, normally the person that we're calling is aware of our service, is aware that referrals being made. So saying that, often when we do make that initial call, they'll go, "Who are you?" Because when you're in that time of trauma or shock, you might just say and agree to anything. So we often again explain about our service and what we can offer, and we will have that conversation, and we will arrange to speak when it's convenient. So it may not be convenient. Often we may make that initial call and we'll say, "I've got lots of family around at the moment, I'm okay, can you call me back in a few days?" And we will do that. But for example, we made a call to somebody, it was quite a few months ago now, and we called her and she didn't have any other family members. She'd just lost a parent. She was a student at university, hadn't organised a funeral, didn't know what to do. So she was really grateful of that practical, intensive support. So for some people, it can be very intensive, and we do a lot of work with that individual. For others, it can be less intensive initially, because there's lots of family support. But once that family support has backed off, and it does back off after a while, then we're still here to provide that support for them when they need it.
Yeah. So as Helen said, and I think that was quite an interesting comment in terms of misadventure. So if it does get classified as an accident or an open verdict, do you still carry on supporting those individuals?
We will have been supporting them. Normally, when we get sort of an initial referral, when it's a suspected suicide and the coroner may do a referral, we would be speaking to the coroner, and we would often have that information that's probably going to inform us that actually it is going to be a suicide. So you know, all those indications are that it is going to be that. So we wouldn't just drop somebody.
Yeah.
Supporting them for that long up until that point. I mean, we're supporting people now whose inquest is a couple of years. We're still waiting because it's quite a complex inquest. Some inquests happen very quickly, but yet, you know, for those families, we're providing support. But just to say, it's not just families that we provide support to. I think, yes, families need that support, but often you forget it's the friends of friends of that loved one as well. So we can support friends, colleagues. We've supported other, whether they've been in a workplace. We've offered some debrief for workplace staff where they've lost a colleague and they're still impacted by that loss. So we've been able to do that, and hopefully normalising that word suicide and having some of those conversations that people do still avoid. You're right, Helen. I've seen somebody recently who said, my friend who I see every day when I go and buy a newspaper crossed over the road because he didn't want to have a conversation with me. And that's how they feel. Maybe the friend didn't do that for that reason, but that's how it leaves that person feeling.
Something else that I've come across as well is when someone has attempted to take their life, family members and friends are then concerned in regards to approaching them and asking them about it. So quite often they avoid that conversation. Has anyone got any advice on how to approach these conversations, whether it is someone that has unfortunately lost someone to suicide, or whether it is that family member where someone's attempted suicide in their family and they want to approach talking to them about it?
I mean, what we often have, Sam, and unfortunately we know there's a percentage of people who lose somebody to suicide will go on to take their own lives or attempt to take their own lives, and we see that with some of the people that we are supporting. And again, for me, it would just be about normalising that conversation and making sure they're accessing support where needed. I think Dave said earlier about, we're not a crisis support service, and sometimes people come to you and they are in crisis, but it's about signposting those people to the right service, but making sure that they're accessing that support.
Yeah, and I'd add to that, just for people not to have fear, just because you go and have a conversation and say, how are you? Doesn't mean you have to be the one and only pillar of strength for them. It doesn't mean they're going to be calling you 5 times a day in bits. You don't have to be that person. And I think people are worried that they're going to have to burden all of this person's kind of pain and guilt. And that's not the case. If just talk to them. If you talk about suicide to somebody who's actively trying to take their own life, actually, it's not going to make it worse. The word suicide is not going to make somebody take their life. Talking about it could actually give somebody that beacon of hope, could actually spark something within them that kind of disengages that crisis and enables them to stop, breathe, maybe reach out, access support, and stop the thought of completing suicide. If somebody's lost somebody to suicide, you're not going to hurt them anymore by having a conversation with them. In fact, they're going to really, in the majority of cases, want to talk about the person. You don't even have to talk about the suicide. Just talk about the person. I still, my partner is still my partner. He's still the father to my children. We still talk about him. And we always will. And that kind of covers bereavement as a whole. People kind of forget that these people have names and they're human, and they're always going to live in other people's hearts and minds, and we just need to, it's about normalizing conversation. Just talk. It's not going to make a situation worse. Yes, we probably will cry, but wouldn't you? It is just about, you're not going to, like I say, you're not going to be burdened with everything. If it gets too much, you can say, I'm really sorry, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say. You can say that. We don't expect you to know what to say. We don't even know what to say or to do. So how the hell are you going to know? And it's just...
Yeah, one of the things that I was going to ask Helen about children and talking to children, and that's one of the things that we get asked a lot from people that we support, how to talk to children or explain to children what's happened. And, we see different examples of that. Children who maybe it's not they don't know and they're not told, but other children know that who they may go to school with. And then we've got children where it's shared and they share it, and it's quite healthy. But I don't know whether that's something that we could talk about or just mention, because
I'm happy to share on that, definitely. Because
that was going to be my next question, actually, Sammie. Thank you. You share the same name, it's all right, similar.
I think absolutely it should be a conversation. This is their parent, their grandparent, their brother, their sister, and they're going to find out at some point. So Winston's Wish are really great. They've got a book called Hard Rock.
Got it here.
Got it. Yeah, it's really, really good actually, and it kind of goes through in child appropriate kind of talk. But the way I approached it, to begin with, Daddy was dead, and I always use the word dead. Not for me, not up in heaven, and obviously that's your own personal thing, but I think you have to categorically say dead to a child, because up in heaven is, they can come back down in their mind. And also with when to begin with, I was saying, he's up in heaven, and if anyone talked out of a top window, they'd think it was Daddy, because if they were up, and to the child the top window is like up in heaven because it's really, really high. So you've got to be factual with your words. And I've just gone on the basis of, if my child asks me a question, I will answer them age appropriately. Obviously, method is something I haven't really covered. I have certain play activities I don't allow because of relation and everything. But they know that Daddy took his own life, and he got so sad in his head, he became unwell and he couldn't go on anymore. That's what I've explained, and we've gone to where Daddy died, just so we can think about it and talk about it. But it's individual to each family. But if the children are going to find out, and I'm pretty sure you'd much rather they find out from you in a way that you want to voice it and word it, as opposed to in the playground or in the shops, or somebody at some point shouting it out because they could be a bit mean, sadly. But as a parent, it's so hard to have to say that. It's hard enough to tell them that they're dead, let alone everything else. So just do it at your own pace. But I absolutely, this is the world they're growing up in. And just by telling them doesn't put them at risk. It does not put your children at more risk of completing suicide or anything themselves. Although obviously there are, high statistics of people who complete suicide after losing someone to suicide. But I think if we engage in these conversations and normalise them from a young age, and they're more aware of suicide, what could lead to it, and how to look after themselves and prevent it. So just have lots of conversations around mental health as well as the loss of. You've got to find that balance, but you really need to instill kind of healthy coping mechanisms and conversations. Actually, you're building a much more resilient and mentally healthy future generation by having these conversations, although they are some of the hardest ones you will have. But as a parent, I promise you, you can do it if there's anyone out there struggling, and there is help, and those books are fantastic.
Could you just tell us a bit more about the book, The Hard Rock? I've not heard of this before. It sounds really interesting.
Beyond the Rough Rock.
That's it.
Beyond the Rough Rock.
Yeah, it's Winston's Wish. If you contact them, they will send you those books as well, so copies of them. But Child Bereavement UK on their website have got some really good resources as well, for talking to children about suicide and things like that. But Winston's Wish are a really good service as well.
Great, I've not heard of that before.
They do camps as well. When it's not COVID time, children can go and do camps and activities with other children and families who have lost parents through whether it be murder, suicide, all sorts of things. So it's a really great kind of peer strength building exercise for children as well, you know, because obviously they want to have conversations around it as well.
Right. That's great to know. Dave, I know you came off mute before. I know I've just kind of overtook the questions for the first 45 minutes as usual. Is there anything you want to ask, Dave? And then can I ask people in the chat as well? We have 15 minutes left. Please start to put your questions into the chat and we'll come to answer them in the next 5 or 10 minutes. And then I'll hand it over to Dave now and I'll shut up.
It was just in reference to the question you asked before about how to treat someone who has attempted a suicide. And I don't know if Helen and Sammie know this, but I know a lot of this community do know this, that I did nearly 12 years ago. And one of the best things for me in that situation was practically everyone walked around me on eggshells, but my best friend Stu treated me like a regular human and took me to the cinema. And he basically was like, we can talk about it if you want, but we don't have to. And I think we've talked about this on the show a bunch of times. This theme comes up a lot, is we don't always know what to say, and that's okay, because we've not all sat there and studied this stuff on a daily basis. You know, it's okay that we don't know what to say. And as Helen said before, it's okay to say to the person, I actually don't know what to say. But I would always recommend to people asking the person, like do you want to talk about this? I'm happy to sit and listen, or I'm happy to talk to you about this. But I'm equally happy to go and watch Notting Hill with you, or whatever, let's just do something for escapism, and let the person kind of give you a bit of an indication of what they need. You know, how can a very, very powerful question is, how can I support you at this time? And the other person may still turn around and say, I don't know. And then you might have to come up with some suggestions, but sometimes that might just get straight to it, and the person can say, well, you know what, I just want to forget about it for a minute. I've been talking. I've had like that before. That person that had a lot of people around. I've spoken about this all day. I'm tired. I don't want to talk about it right now. Or it might be actually no one's asked me, and I really could just do with just sharing a memory or talking about my feelings and whatever it might be. But yeah, it sounds so simple that it should be common sense, but it isn't common sense for us to just say, how can I help you through this time?
I know, Dave, that you actually, through your work, you do get people approaching you that are quite often suicidal at times. How do you deal with that yourself?
So I'm trained by Papyrus to deal with suicide intervention and prevention. So if I have the capacity for it at the time, then I do it. If I can get on a call with somebody, or if I can, but primarily I tend to point people towards resources, which is a very difficult thing, because I'm very careful about how I do that. And the thing I would often say to people is, look, this isn't because I actually don't want to help you, because it happens in streams. I get people in live streams, and I've got potentially 30 people watching, and it's not the right parameter to be doing a suicide intervention with an audience. It's just not right. So I actually often say to people, because that person is someone a lot of people have already said that use the hotlines, and I'm like, look, the reason we're saying use the hotlines and use the helplines is because it's not because we don't want to help you, it's because we want you to get the right help. It's like, I'm not going to give you the right help that you need right now. And the reason I have to put that message out there is because, like a lot of other mental health content creators on the internet, we start off with if anyone ever needs a hit in ear, I'm always there. My DMs are always open. That's where we all start off, and we think that we can handle that. and maybe we can when one person a month reaches out to us, or whatever it might be. Maybe we can. But I've had it where a person's reached out to me at 3:00 in the morning. I'm asleep with my phone on silent at that point. I'm not waking up for that. And then when I do wake up and I see that in the morning, the first thing I'm thinking is, was I not there for that person? And it's about understanding what is there for a person at a time. And it's very difficult for a person to not expect any particular one individual to have the capacity to handle everything. That's why the helplines are there. They are there with a situation where there are multiple people that are there for that specific purpose at that time, and have supervision and have debriefing. So so they are there in a position that whatever you put on them, they are going to be okay to take. And if they're not okay to take it, you'll never know about it, because they'll have gone and dealt with that with their supervisor. Whereas if you open up if you want someone else who's not trained to that capacity to be there for you, they might not have the emotional capacity to deal with it. They probably don't have the training. And again, it's what do you need at that time? If you just need connection, a friend can be there for that connection, but just be aware that the friend that you're reaching out to might actually be with a different friend, might be with their partner, might have just had a child. There's so many different parameters, because a suicidal mind will warp everything you see. And if a friend doesn't get back to you straight away, well, you know my story. You know that, 12, nearly 12 years ago, I felt like nobody loved me. I went on Facebook, I need a hug, drove home from Liverpool, and in the 45 minutes it took me to drive home from Liverpool, no one had given me a hug. Now, that in isolation, all on its own, would probably never have been a problem for me. It'd have been like, oh well. But in that point where I was already suicidal, and I was thinking that everybody hated me, that was enough proof for me. So as I would always, I've said to you before, it's about having those expectations, and it's really hard to ask a person in crisis to not act as if they're not, to act as if they're not in crisis, but I would say it's important to have these conversations so that when you are in crisis, hopefully somewhere in your mind there is actually the helpline. I know I want my friends right now. I want my friends because that's familiar, that's comfortable, that's real. But am I actually? What happens if I don't get them? And we go to the helpline, and and it's and I think that's it's important, because again, I know you've had it in the past as well, and no mental health advocate on the internet, as much as you may watch my content and feel that there's this great connection and therefore you can open up to me. I love the fact that that's there, but the last thing I want is for you to open up to me and then me not be able to get to that for like a day and a half, and you to be sat there suffering. That's not because you're not important to me. That's because and it's not, if you do that to anyone else, it's not because you're not important to any of those people.
Because they are important, isn't it? And I think, you've got to make sure that, like you say, they get the right help, because they are important.
Exactly.
And you haven't always got the ability, the time, or the mental capacity yourself to be able to do it, and making sure they're getting the right support at the right time from the right people at a consistent level, because you might be able to dip in and out, but you're not going to be able to be there for the whole journey.
Yeah.
And it is a journey. So yeah, I don't think anyone should be able to have to burden themselves with it. You do need professionals, and you need it ongoing. So
yeah,
never feel bad about that.
No, I did it first. Again, that's something I had to learn my own path with that through those experiences, because and you will see it a lot. Like as I say, a lot of mental health advocates, we all want to make as much of a change in the world as possible, and especially when we're a bit younger, we go into it like with the bright eyes and the bushy tail, thinking that it's like, oh, after a few years, like, oh, this is why this why this need is still there, because it's really really difficult to do that. And you can't unfortunately you cannot be there for everybody.
I'd just like to say as well, I didn't know Dave 12 years ago, but if I did, Dave, I would have given you a massive man hug.
Don't you
100%.
Dare. I've still got my tissues right here. Honestly.
So, Sammy, can I just come back to you and ask you a question, please? Over the last 12 months, have you seen an impact on people reaching out to your service because of the pandemic?
We get asked that question a lot. We haven't seen an increase in suicides over the last 12 months. We haven't seen that. Obviously there's an increase in mental health, and we all know that. And services are inundated with people who are struggling with mental health. But that isn't to say that there will be, given the post-lockdown and the impact of other things. And one of the sad things is that there may be more opportunities for people who want to take their lives now because of that, because of people going back to normality, really. And maybe not them, if somebody has had everybody at home and hasn't feel as isolated, maybe once people start to go back out more, that they may start to feel isolated and have some opportunities again to be alone and struggle. So yes, we do envisage that there will be some possibly arise, but that we haven't seen that as yet. And I know some research a while ago said at times of pandemics and wars and things like that, people tend to stick together. And I think that is that's been evident in some of the because people predicted there would be a rise and there hasn't been.
Yeah, and there was a lot of false stuff circulating around social media, wasn't there? There's been an increase by 200%. But I think actually when you look around the area we live, actually, in comparison to the year before, it was similar. It was similar numbers. I think the only sort of increase I think that did occur was actually in young women when we first went into lockdown.
Yeah, more women are taking their lives and attempting, especially in the Merseyside area, we're seeing that. But what was I going to say then? I've forgotten what I was going to say. But yes, we have seen that. Part of what we're seeing at the moment is an increase in referrals because of promotion and more people are aware of us. So I'm not getting too concerned that the rate is rising because I work very closely with public health and they're not seeing that as well. So it's just that we're getting out there, more people are aware of us. So that for me is a positive thing, that people will get that support that they need.
And what would you recommend, Sammie, to people that aren't in the areas where Amparo is? What would you recommend to those individuals?
There's always, and there should always be, a suicide postvention or bereavement service around. I think, Helen, you mentioned the Tomorrow Project, and they work in Nottingham and Derbyshire. But in Greater Manchester, we've got Shining the Light on Suicide. So even if we get calls to Amparo, we would, and they're not in our area, we would signpost to the most relevant service in their area. So again, if there's any professionals, or if there's always, you can always find a bereavement support service, whether it's postvention or not, in your area. And more public health are commissioning services and making sure it's definitely on the agenda this year about making sure that there's money available for these services to be, and it's positive that we've now got the Lancashire and the Merseyside contract, and that's in place for a number of years to be able to offer our service.
Great, thanks, Sammie. Appreciate that. Dave, is there any questions in the chat? Because I end up just asking loads and loads of questions.
Yeah. I'll go from the bottom up. So, any ideas for older teenage children who refuse to engage with support? It's terrifying to think about the longer term impact of them.
Helen or Sammie, do you want to come in with this?
I mean, we just recommend all the local services and support services. I think one of the things that when Dave was mentioning earlier about social media is social media can be a great help, and it can be good because there's lots of apps and services, and we would direct to those. But sometimes I don't know whether it's a certain age group don't want to use social media. So again, it's just about sort of signposting to a service where there might be that face-to-face support as well.
Yeah, I think for parents with teenagers, sometimes having a face-to-face conversation can just be too intense for them. So actually text your children or WhatsApp them. So you're not in the same room, and quite often they'll open up a bit more honestly, and try, I know it's really hard, really hard, but try not to go into full-blown catastrophizing parent mode, and shine that kind of across to them. Try and, before you have a conversation, take some deep breaths, think about what you want to say, have a light-hearted conversation, and then just don't, do little and often, don't overwhelm them, maybe get them a leaflet and leave it on their bed, just don't be too in their face, and you probably will get more out of them by the stepping back approach.
And just to say as well, myself and Dave have done a webinar on communication, which may help you. So if you type in the Mental Health Family Hour communication on YouTube, there's some really fantastic insights into how to approach these type of conversations on there as well. Dave, do you wanna
Also,
go
on
next?
top of that as well, if the teenagers do prefer to text and they want additional support, then Shout is there for that, which is 85258. And Shout are, they are a helpline that is there for any crisis. So if your crisis is, I am grieving, I am bereaved of someone by suicide, it's not just, people seem to think that Shout is like, it's a line for people who are suicidal, and the same with the Samaritans. That's not just there for people who are suicidal. It's there for people in other forms of crisis as well. So if you are struggling with anything and you would rather text somebody than actually speak to someone, which, if you've got that coupled with social anxiety as well, is almost certainly going to be the case that you'd rather text.
There's also the Silver Cloud and the Big White Wall as well, which are two other online platforms which you can use.
Good service as well, isn't it? Because I know that's a tech service as well.
Yeah, and the thing again with those is that rather than going to a Facebook group where you where you're basically shouting into the void and seeing which moderator comes back or if anyone's available, you get a dedicated one-to-one person with those services, which is important, because you're getting sort of that throughout it's only for the duration of that call. You get that one person. You're probably never going to get that one person again, but you have that consistency through that call, rather than 74 different voices that might chime in, which can be useful on groups sometimes, but it can also be very overwhelming. Someone said the experience is very different, as the bereaved is not the next of kin. There's a distinct lack of connect or liaison from the police when you're not the next of kin. But then MRH Wellbeing basically replied saying that Amparo do support anyone affected by suicide, not only the next of kin. Is that accurate, Sammie?
Yeah, that's accurate, and I think sometimes that they're the missed, or almost because of that. What we tend to do is, when we're in contact with those who are supporting, we'll say, is there anybody else that we can support, whether it be indirect family members, etc.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
A lot of comments as well saying thank you to Helen for being so brave and open up and talking about it. Thank you so much, Helen, for talking about this and opening yourself up. The fact that you can talk about it, Helen, is so brave. You were amazing. So sorry for your loss, Helen. You've absolutely right. Being bereaved by suicide completely changes your life forever. It's not something you ever get over. And then just morning, Sam and Dave, thank you for doing this very important topic. Hey, we're just hosting it.
We're just the hosts. We don't do the hard work.
Yeah, we used to do the hard work, and then we started getting guests.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
We used to write the content once upon a time.
Yeah. I just want to say, then I'll round this up. There's a huge thank you both to Helen and Sammie. Sammie, thank you for your insight to your service. It's been really insightful. And Helen, once again, a huge thank you to yourself for opening up and sharing your experiences today. I'm not going to go into what I said before again, because I learned it well enough, honestly. So just a huge thank you to you. Really, really appreciate it, as does Dave and everyone that's watched today. So thank you very much. As I said, if anyone has been affected by this, then please do go to the Hub of Hope and type in your postcode, and you'll be able to see all the services available to you in that area as well, and all the other services that we mentioned, including Sammie's. We'll put this in the YouTube description as well afterwards, and if you are on my mailing list, then I'll be sending out a list of services on there also. So thank you very much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We are coming back at this time next week to talk about becoming a new parent. So we'll see you then. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. And one last one that's just come through just as we was about to hit stop was thank you for this. 2 years ago today was my mum's funeral, and this webinar has really helped me today. I'm really struggling with the loss of my mum, but I have the help of the Tomorrow Project, so thank you. So thank you for
really
sharing.
Sorry to hear about the loss of your mum, and I'm glad that you're getting support now, so that's really good to hear. Thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you, everybody, and
Does Helen and Sammie have any parting words, by the way? Sorry, I forgot to ask that.
I'd just like to say thank you for the opportunity to share it, and it's done what I wanted it to, and it's reached somebody who needed it, and that always gives you that makes me well up. Just knowing that lady has gained something from it, and I hope other people know they're not alone, and there are amazing services like Sammie's out there that do want to help, will help. I know it feels like you can't get through it, but I promise you will, and you can do it.
Sammie, is there anything that you want to add?
I would just say thank you again for inviting us along, and just to say anybody who wants any support or any advice, just to either contact us on our telephone line, which you'll be putting out, or send us an email, etc.
Thanks, Sammie. Thanks everyone again. We'll stop the live stream.